It can only mean one thing, and that is Making Comics 101 is back, and this time we are live. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Circworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where together we're going to create some awesome comics because this is Making Comics 101 live. This is the inaugural episode. We were calling these issues before. It's been a while since I've done this, so I gotta get back in the frame of mind. But the inaugural issue, because we're keeping it all comics related, of Making Comics 101 live. If you're not familiar with what Making Comics 101 is, it is an entire series that I did, basically taking you step by step through the process of creating a comic book. If you have any interest in creating comic books, you definitely want to check that out. You can jump in at almost any episode. If you want to jump into the penciling episode or the inking episode or the ideas episode, but that's what it is. It is, you can jump in or you can watch it all the way through. There are like 69 episodes in total. So plenty of content out there. Pretty much a crash course of everything you need to know to create a comic, everything from coming up with your ideas all the way to publishing it, promoting it, and every single thing in between. So definitely check that out. There is a playlist on this station. But even though I covered so much on that, I always get questions like, can you go in a little deeper on this? Or can you talk about this? Or you just kind of brushed over this particular thing that I want to know about. So if there's something you felt that I missed or I glossed over, or you just want me to talk a little more about, now's your chance. Hit that chat up. Let me know. I'm going to be checking the chat. Also, I've been gathering some questions and things from emails and from the comment section and everything. So what this series is about is pretty much up to you. It's all going to be informed by your questions, what you want this series to be. So why keep talking about this? Let's move on with it. I'm going to pull up the screen. I'm going to pull up the chat and get to your questions.
All right, hey everybody. So let me know if the volume level is okay. Full disclosure, that beginning intro was pre-recorded, but we are live now. So I'm ready to answer your questions. If you have any questions, if you don't, I've got some written down that people had asked me in the chat and everything. So I see some of you guys. Let's see. We got Wonky Art. I'm glad I was on here. I'll just pull this up. I can do that. I'm glad I was on YouTube this morning. Greetings from Alaska. Hey, oh man, I'd love to get over to Alaska. That'd be great. We've got Victor in the chat. Who else we got? Got Remy in the chat. Oops, we're all over the place. Anyway, so let's see. Okay, man, it's gonna go fast. So first, just let me let you guys know kind of what you're seeing on the screen right now. This is my new product that's going to be coming out. It's a digital product, tools for making comics. It should be coming out pretty soon. I think sometime early October, which is right around the corner. And I will do a video dedicated to this so you can kind of see what, how to use this and everything. But I just wanted something on the screen while I was going through your questions. Oh man, and greetings from Scotland. Wow, this is great, man. We got people from all over the place. So this is kind of going to be whatever you want it to be or whatever it becomes. I don't actually know yet. I just wanted to continue sort of the making comics idea, and I thought a live stream might be a way to do it. And I always get questions like, oh, could you cover this, or you didn't really touch on that. So if you have anything like that, any questions having to do with making comics, let me know. So I'm going to go through, like I said, I already have some questions here. So and I don't know if there's a way to indicate it. If you do have a question, maybe I'll look for question marks and everything. But if not, if there's some way to highlight it, just put question ahead or something in caps or something if you actually have a question. So anyway, thanks for everyone in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead here. This is a couple questions from UN8-bit. I'm going to read these out. I was wondering if you could make a video on how to draw speedy movements and fight scenes. Also, how to plan them out, of course. That's something I struggle with. And then another question, and I think we can wrap these two together. Could you make a video? And obviously, some of these may warrant a full video, but I do just want to at least touch on them here. So can you make a video on how to create action in comics, e.g. how to show things like fights, car crashes, or car chases, and what camera angles to use, because I struggle with this. All right, so first of all, when I approach like action scenes, one of the things I'm really looking for is to make something dynamic. I don't know if you've ever seen. I've seen some like martial arts movies, and it seemed like, I don't know if this is in the early 2000s or whatever. There was this, I don't know, it was like a trend or whatever, where they had these real up close and personal fight scenes, and it was real visceral, and I can kind of understand where were going with that, but you couldn't really tell what was going on. So for me, I want to take advantage of sort of a larger landscape, and I want to definitely incorporate a lot of foreshortening. So I want to have, characters, and depending on what kind of, if you're working with like a superhero theme, that's a whole different story than, like I said, more of a martial arts thing. But like, say for instance, a superhero theme, if these characters have powers, I mean, they can be distances away. A lot of the action scenes that you see that I compose, you'll see a character maybe way up in the foreground. Maybe you'll just see him in profile for the back of his head, or you'll see a character further in the distance. And also, you want to establish where your characters are in an action scene. And you could obviously, anytime you're starting a new scene, you want to have some sort of establishing shot to show where characters are. And then from there, you want to, from there, once you've established that, all you need are little hints of things. For instance, if your character's in a subway station, maybe just like a little hint of a subway sign or something like that, just to let people know that they're still in there. But once you've established that, that's okay. But as far as action scenes, like I said, foreshortening is a big thing. Really making dynamic poses. And the panel arrangement is another big thing. Like, you'll notice in like my comic book, Young and the Dead, anytime I've got an action scene, the panels get all twisted and everything. It's not everything else. When you're just in a regular scene, they're pretty standard rectangular panels. But once we get into the action scene, they're twisted and tilted and everything. And, going back to sort of establishing shot and everything, you don't want to confuse people. If you ever seen a good example would be like the Transformers movies. Like the first ones, they're really hard. The fight scenes were really hard to tell what was going on, because especially the villains, they were all very monotone, all silver, and just all these gears. And because they're not people, it was hard to tell what was going on in those scenes. Later, I think they improved that. If you ever watched like Bumblebee, the movie Bumblebee, they sort of did a little more with the character designs. Even the villains had a little more color, and it was a little easier to see. But you don't want to confuse people, and you always want to know exactly sort of where your characters are in the scene. And you really want to plan everything out, like with your script and everything. Like I said, if you're in a subway, you want to know where the characters begin and where they're going. And because of that, it's also it's like a mini story. And so any story is going to have, your intro, you're going to, have basically the beginning, middle, and end. So you want to introduce those characters, what's going on in this fight scene, and you want to build tension, and you want to do that throughout that fight scene. And then you need a conclusion or a climax. So it's almost like a mini story within your comic. So make sure that you're doing that. And let's see, you don't want to, if you're doing an action scenes, you do want to you want to use different kinds of camera angles or different panel layouts. You don't want to just kind of go with the same thing. You want to go from, wide angle, close up. But you don't want to confuse the reader. So you want to make sure that that's, people know what's going on. What else? As far as another thing with like action scenes, and you typically don't want to have a lot of dialogue in an action scene. Now, I have kind of thrown that rule out for a few scenes in Young and the Dead, because there's also the flip side where when you're trying to explain things, sometimes it can get a little boring. So if you can throw some action in there while you're trying to explain things, but you don't want it big. You don't, whenever you see like an action scene where there's the villain's giving a big monologue and everything, I mean, it's going to slow down that action. And plus, people can't talk like that and fight at the same time. So, if I do use any dialogue at all, it's going to be like little quick quips and things like that. Like if you've ever seen the way they do fight scenes in Spider-Man. He's always got a little jab and things like that. So those are some of the aspects of that I would approach when doing a fight scene or an action scene, and also pay attention to that page turn, depending on how long your action scene lasts, and you don't want it to last too long. You want, if there's anything like if a character brings out like a major weapon and aims it at our character, and then maybe the character's got this look of like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now, and that should be where your page turn is. And then each time another hit or another blow is kind of like a major blow, that is kind of with the page turn, so you can see what's going to happen and then what actually happens when you turn that page. And the other part of Ewan's question was as far as showing motion. And I guess the go-to thing with that would just be speed lines. Anytime you throw in like lines to kind of show motions, that's something that that's a pretty easy way to do it. Make sure obviously you're going in the right direction and everything with your speed lines. The other thing you can do are sort of like ghost images, and I do that in my comic. There's a scene where it's in one panel where one of the characters is talking, and all of a sudden something happens off screen, and he like whips his head around. And that scene, I drew it so it almost looks like the character has two heads. And I don't remember. Maybe one head is a little lighter than the other. You can do sort of that ghost image. Or if you're throwing a punch, maybe you can kind of see, each step of that punch and everything. And the other thing else I would mention with action scenes as comics is you only want those major, you don't want to show all these little bits and like if a person's throwing a punch, you want to show the wind up and then you want to show it connect. You don't, because the idea of an action scene is you want it to go fast. So you just want the major beats, and you don't want to put all this intermediate stuff in there. So anyway, so there's some stuff as far as how I approach action scenes. So I'm going to go back in here and address some of these other questions. Let me see what we got here. I know we've got some. Okay, this is from Nat. Let's see. Hi Scott, my question is, are there any other ways to color comics, like using collage, mixed media? Of course, yeah. There's a lot of this stuff is really, there aren't any rules. So yeah, you can do like physical, like if you want to do traditional watercolors, you can do that. And I've seen comics where they use mixed media. There really aren't any rules. And also anything I say in this video, it's open to interpretation. Somebody may have a different take on it. So, but yeah, I'd love to see different takes on using different ways to color comics. So for me, and most of my comics are in black and white, to be perfectly honest. And sometimes they'll have grayscale. I'm kind of partial to black and white. I really like black and white line art, and I'm really not the best at coloring, so I tend to stick away from that. But yeah, anything you guys want to do as far as color, yeah, experiment. That's what makes this medium so awesome. Let's see. Here we go from Salazar Art Nation. Do you do character sheets for every character, or is that mainly for main characters? Yeah, sometimes not even my main characters. And if you've watched the series, you'll know there's the whole idea of just spending all this time up front putting your comic together and everything. If that just you waste a lot of time with that. So a lot of times, like main characters, sometimes I will do model sheets, especially if a character has a particular costume. If it's like a plain clothes person, if you just got like a regular jacket, like a coat, like a suit and tie, you don't really need to do a turnaround, because most people know what a suit and tie looks like, unless it's something elaborate. So you definitely, with minor characters, I don't bother. Like even with Young and the Dead, I think I did initial sketches of each of my characters, but because again, they're just mainly wearing jeans and t-shirts, I didn't do a lot of turnarounds and things like that. If it's more of a superhero, he's got more of an elaborate costume, I might do that. But I do find myself referring back to old comics and like, oh, what was this character wearing? So it can be helpful, and it's kind of up to you. But I would judge it on how detailed the character is, as far as if you do a model sheet. But you just don't want to get into that habit of spending way too much time up front building your world, because then you're never going to get around to doing your comic. Let's see. Where are we here? I know we had some. Oh, here's another question. Custom Gamer 63 question. I have an idea for a comic, but I don't know where to start. What would you recommend? Well, I don't know if you've seen the series, but there's a whole episode on just getting started. It's one of the early episodes. I put a lot of those ideas out there, so that's the first place I'd start, because I think that's going to give you a general idea. For me, it really depends on the idea. And there was another question I got too from, let's see, it was in here somewhere. I'm gonna refer back to this. Yeah, this is a question from Ronald. Where do you get inspiration for your comic book ideas? It really depends. It's usually my best ideas come when I'm not even expecting it. Like for Young and the Dead, that was just going to be a simple zombie story, and then it became more once I started getting into it. But you want to, obviously you want something that you're passionate about, something that you're interested in, because otherwise you're just, your stories aren't going to be that interesting because you're not interested in it. Sometimes it's a problem. Like when I did a sample comic in this series, Making Comics 101, where what I wanted to do was, I noticed like when Image first came out, they had a lot of derivative characters, like, oh, this is my character like Wolverine, or this is my character like Deadpool, or whatever like that. But I noticed there wasn't really a character like Spider-Man, which is a major character, and Spider-Man's sort of original in that way. So I wanted to, like, if I was going to do a derivative character on Spider-Man, how would I do that? So that started with the question. So that's what kind of sparked my idea, and how do I accomplish that? And from there I was like, well, what other ways can I go with this? And I'm thinking, are there any other characters kind of like Spider-Man as far as swinging around through the city or whatever? And then I was thinking, well, Tarzan's kind of like Spider-Man in that he kind of swings through the jungle. I mean, obviously he doesn't have powers, he doesn't spin webs. So then I decided, well, what if I kind of combine like Tarzan? And that's another good idea for coming up with ideas, is just take two different things and see if you can kind of combine them together to create something original. So anyway, you've got this Tarzan character. Of course, I wanted him to be in the city, but there's no vines or anything. And I wanted him to have powers. I don't want him to just be like Tarzan, where he was raised by apes and he kind of learned how to do all this stuff that way. So he had the ability to control like vegetation or whatever. So then I decided, well, what if this is in a post-apocalyptic world where the whole city has been overrun by vegetation or whatever, and he can control that, and then he can kind of summon the vines and he can swing through them. So that was the problem that I posed to myself, and that's sort of the solution that I came up with. All right, let's see. Let's keep going. I know we've got, there's like tons of comments and everything. I'm looking for the questions now. And there are some questions that I will address. Victor's got a question about KDP. I'll probably address that on a different episode, because that's sort of a whole other, topic other than comics. So we've got a lot of people saying that, yeah, they're interested in mixed media, and yeah, I would love to see more comics like that. Anything you can do to try to make your comic book more original, I think is awesome. Let me kind of scroll again through here. I like this idea. So Dan or Paleo, hopefully I'm horrible with names, so forgive me. And I apologize, we are live, so if you hear that plane flying by. I feel like we should make a CircWorks comic club where we could all make comics with these products and share our work and ideas. Yeah, that's something I really do want to do. I know Marshall, my friend Marshall Lee, he's got the AAA creators, and I definitely want to do something more like that. Right now, the only closest thing I got is my Patreon. That's a little more tight-knit community. I know not everyone can do that, so maybe I'll try to figure out some way we can do something like that. Hopefully the first of the year I want to kind of reapproach, reanalyze, I guess, my YouTube channel and figure out what I want to do with this. So and maybe make some changes and do some new things and kind of revitalize some stuff. So we'll see what happens with that. Color pencil. Yeah, there's a right here. And that leads me to another question I had. So I'm going to answer this one here. So where is that question? Okay, this is from Mark Baker. Hello, I have a question about the blue 2mm pencil leads. Whenever I try to erase lines, they don't come up as efficiently as, say, a 2H or an H pencil lead. Am I putting too much pressure on the page? And do I need to draw lightly with the blue lead? So I use, when I do traditional stuff, I use blue lead quite a bit. And by the nature of that, the blue lead is it's supposed to be non-reproducible. So you're not really necessarily supposed to erase it. You can. I do. And it's like if you've ever used like Prismacolor Cold Erase pencils, even though they're erasable, you can't usually get all of the erasers out. But that to me, that's kind of the charm. Like when you look at my sketches, you can see some of that red or blue pencil if I'm using Cold Erase behind it. And I kind of like that look. But obviously, if you're printing a comic, you don't want all that in there. But those blue leads, even if you look at like the screen right now, if you see the outline, you can kind of see all the guides. They're in non-photo blue. Now today, because printers can pick up a lot of that, I would still hide that stuff before I go to print because I don't know what kind of process they're using, and especially if they're scanning in color, then that might come up. But traditionally, when they used to take photostats and photograph comics for print, that blue would just not show up. So that's the whole idea behind that. But usually when I'm using a non-photo blue pencil, I do really start light. And then I just sort of build up and kind of get the idea of my gesture and everything. And then I'll go over it a little more. And then once I get to the point, I'll ink it. And I don't bother erasing the ink. When I scan it in, I'll just make sure it's scanning for black and white, and it won't see that. It won't see that that non-photo blue. You can erase it to a certain extent, but it's just not like graphite. It's just, I've never found a non-photo blue pencil that will fully erase. And again, it's not really necessary. Some people, when they look at comic book artwork, they want to just see it's super clean, like original artwork, like it's totally black. I like to see all the little corrections and see how the artists, what tools they were using, if they've pasted anything in, that type of thing. So that's sort of my thing on why I use the blue pencil. Also, for some reason, I just like, and lately I've been doing a lot more digital comics, but when I do traditional pencils, it really is. It's just, I don't know. I just like that feel, the feel of the blue pencil. And it's got a little waxy feel to it, which you got to be careful. If you have a really heavy hand and you're using that blue pencil, like the Prismacolor leads that go in the lead holders, those, they do have a little bit of wax to them. So sometimes the ink it'll kind of reject the ink a little bit. So you don't want to go too heavy on that anyway. So that's a pretty good question as far as the blue pencil leads. So let's see. So here we got another question. Let's see. ICJ question: what size page do you use for single page or double page spread in Photoshop? So that's a good question. Like in Photoshop, a lot of people, because it's computer, they'll use pixels. I don't usually. It's weird, but I still don't really understand pixels, like the conversion. So I still go with. I'm in the U.S., so I use inches. So if you're anywhere outside of the U.S., it might not make sense to you, but hopefully you can do a quick Google conversion and figure out. But I go with 11 by 17. Now that's when I go physical comics, I go 11 by 17. And then those, I forgot what those were reduced to. I don't know them offhand, but this is stuff you can kind of find online. And I think I even mentioned it there is a page. I think there's probably a layout episode on Making Comics 101 in the series that gives all that information specifically. But definitely if you go like 11 by 17 for a single page, and if you go at 300 DPI, that'll give you some room, because once it reduces, you can kind of bump up that resolution to get it up to around 600 or so. And that's plenty. It usually prints at 300, but definitely make sure that you are at 300 DPI, at the very least, actual comic book size, which is and then also there's American comics, there's manga comics. And another thing, I'll just mention this product that I'm showing here, the Amazing Comic Book World Builder. It'll have templates like these master templates where you can set up both double page spreads and, you know, for manga, for magazine, for American. And then sometimes there are odd sizes, like some people want to do it more of like a traditional book, like where it's like more of a magazine. So yeah, American is there's pretty much that standard American size. There's a really odd size. I'm sure there's some reasoning behind why they went with that size. But it's the main thing, it really doesn't matter. The thing that matters most is the dimensions. It doesn't matter kind of how big it is, just that your dimensions are right, so that when you reduce it down, you don't have to skew anything, and you don't have like these almost like letter boxes on each side. You know, so that's something to think about when you're doing when you're figuring out your size. The main thing to remember is just make sure those dimensions are right. And I've got a video that shows how to do that. I think it's a bonus episode. But one thing what I'll do is I'll just find out whatever size an actual American comic, if I'm working in that American size, and just draw a diagonal line from the bottom left-hand corner through the upper right-hand corner, that diagonal line. And once that goes off where your comic book is, you know, working on, hopefully this makes sense, working on a bigger page, or again, digital, or you can just make a box. If it's digital, you can just make a box the actual size of a comic book, and then just make sure your proportions are constrained and pull that up. But if you're working physical, just draw that diagonal line through the page, and then just kind of go up, and where that line connects, you can make your page that size. I'm sorry, it's a little hard to, hopefully you can picture what I'm talking about. But again, if you're working digital, it's just a matter of taking that actual size and then just constrain the proportions and make that box bigger, and you'll always be okay. But you definitely do want to work bigger. You don't want to go lower than 300 DPI at the actual size. And I would always go a little bit higher. That's why I typically work. And part of it's because I'm used to starting traditionally, that I still work 11 by 17. Again, that's inches. Apologies to anyone that's outside of the U.S. I know the U.S., I mean, we just do things differently here for some reason. I don't know. All right, let me see what we got. We got some more questions. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to try to hopefully write down some of these questions. So if I don't get them today, because we're only going to go for like an hour, I think, on this show. Because what you're seeing, the stuff you're seeing on screen is pre-recorded. I'm live. I'm talking to you guys live. But once this video kind of runs its course, then that's when I'm going to wrap it up. So I will try to get to any questions that I didn't on another episode. But I'm glad you guys really have some questions ready. So Rami Serplin, hopefully I got that right. Question: my simple comic book adventure idea has accidentally turned into a magnum opus. What do I do? Oh man. Simplify it again, turn it into smaller short stories based on point of view. Oh, that might work. Yeah, I like that suggestion, and that is exactly why I do, because the idea for Young and the Dead, my comic book, was, you know, a graphic novel. Like everyone else wants a graphic novel, but I knew that was going to be so overwhelming to me that I would never get it done. So basically what I did, I just chopped it up into issues. So if you can chop it up into issues, if you can, you know, I like the idea of maybe different points of view, but really, especially, I don't know how many comics you've created before, Rami, but you want to keep it simple, especially in the beginning, because if you start with this overwhelming thing, then it's the chance of you actually finishing it are really slim. So any way you can break that up, or just take a section of that and tell that story, and you can build it. And you can always take, like if you cut it up into individual stories or whatever, and I don't know how your story is structured, but then you can always hopefully maybe string it together, add some little interstitials or whatever you can to bring it all together. But if you know anything about me, if you've watched the series, you know the biggest thing I say is don't start huge. And I know sometimes you can have the intention to start small and gets out of hand, and that's kind of the way it was with Young and the Dead. I don't know if it necessarily got out of hand, but it did get bigger than what I was expecting. So anything that you can do to just tell a small story, maybe each individual character has a story that's still in that sort of that universe, so you feel like you're still telling that story, but you're just not going crazy with, you know, trying to tell this this huge story all at once. So hopefully that is helpful. Let's see what we got here. I'm just making sure some of these are questions. I know there's a lot of great comments in here. Let's see. And then, Victor says he can't figure out the pixel dimension either. I go with inches. I know Victor's in the US as well. Let's see. Question. We got another question. All right. Jam Creates. Question. I have noticed that different printers have different dimensions for guidelines. Should I decide on a printer before starting work on my own page? Yeah, that's probably a good idea, although that's not something I usually do. And I would imagine that most of them are similar. They're not too far off. I would assume if you're working in because I know I've seen if you go to if you down and I sell templates too as well in this product that I'm doing, and it's possible that template might be a little off from, say, if you wanted to go with a Kablam or Amazon KDP or whoever, or if you want to go traditional printing, it may be a little bit off, but it shouldn't be that far off if they're used to printing comics, American comics, or even manga, because I think manga is pretty standard. I don't think it's like children's book. Children's books are all over the place. I mean, there's no standard children's book size, but I think with manga, there's pretty much a standard size. With American comics, there's a standard size. European comics, I think they kind of have a standard size as well. I think it's more a magazine. I could be wrong. But it should be close enough that you can make alterations to the end. But if you do know who your printer is going to be up front, it wouldn't hurt to get that information directly from them, so you don't have to tweak it that much. But like I said, it shouldn't be so much that you're having to put, like I said, letterbox, because if I was before I really knew about comic book sizes or whatever, I drew everything on, again, this is American Standard page, but 8.5 by 11. And that size it doesn't convert to comic book, like American comic books. So you would, once I reduce it, you do have like a space at the top and a space at the bottom. And sometimes you'll see that in comics. And then they'll add like a little thing up at the top, like a little border or something to kind of, so that fill that space. But I know they've got to be close. If it's an American comic book or whatever, they should be close enough that you can do minor tweaks without really, wrecking it. And I've had to do that a little bit when I go to a certain thing, but it shouldn't be so bad. I mean, the dimensions shouldn't be so far off that you just have to you're out of luck. So, but if you do know your printer up front, that would be helpful. Okay, so we're getting down. I guess I wonder, the thing is, I don't know how much further we're running on this. Because I don't want to start addressing questions that I can't get through. Let's see. I know I had some other questions here. Oh, here we go. Okay, question. How many mini comics should you do before starting a longer form comic book series? With that one, there is no, everything, all this information that I'm putting up here is just in my best practices. And sometimes I would assume some of the comic industry might agree with me. But the main idea with a mini comic is that if you can get something out there, because you want to, once you get one thing done, my advice is put one thing out, one small project, and then make it a little bigger and a little bigger. So if you put out an 8-pager or even a 4-pager to begin with, or even a single page strip or something like that, and then once you do that, you move up. So if you've gone from an 8-pager to a 16-pager, by that point, you could probably go with a 22-page size, floppy size comic. And there are some people that are just super disciplined, and they can actually start off with that magnum opus right off the bat and have no problem with it. It's kind of like saying, if you want to go into actor, they discover you right away and you're a movie star. That happens so rarely. So there are very few people that can do that. I'm definitely not one of those people. So there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. I'm just kind of telling for most people, start small. So yeah, and I love mini comics because there's just so many different ways you can approach the mini comics. And with mini comics, there are no standard sizes you can do. Like, I've done a lot of videos on mini comics. I know my friend Marshall Lee has as well. and you can just search mini comics and you'll find our videos and you can kind of see some of the stuff we talk about. But yeah, you can do so many different things with mini comics. But yeah, it's kind of whenever you feel you're ready, but just know that you're ready. And I would at least have maybe a couple mini comics under your belt before you go with the full-size comic. And maybe you never even have to go with the full-size comic. Maybe you just stick with mini comics because there's, you know, they're awesome. All right, let's see. Okay, we got another question. What about creating art for posers? What size would you recommend for making large art? So I'm not really sure what you mean by when I think posers, I think of like the apps that allow you to pose character. Oh, is that supposed to be posters? I'm guessing that's posters. Yeah, I mean, again, it's like my prints are, I think they're 12 by 18, a little bigger. Like most people go for a standard, because again, American prints are like usually around 11 by 17. I go 12 by 18. Most of my prints are done at Cat Print, and they can print up to that size, but I don't think they can do full bleed at that size. So if you want something full bleed, you have to go a little lower. I usually have a white border on my prints. So take that into consideration. But really, again, you might, what I would do, and I made this mistake before with my prints. I did them at 300 DPI at 12 by 18. But then I decided I want to do bigger posters, and I was able to blow them up and they looked pretty good. But if I would have done them at 600 DPI, at whatever 12 by 18, whatever that original size is, and I'm talking digital, I don't know, you know, if you're going to do, I think you might even be able to scan in like 11 by 17, because sometimes it's hard to do poster art, actual size, like physical poster art. I think if you do it at 11 by 17, you scan it at a higher resolution, you can blow that up, and then depending if you color it digitally or whatever. But really is with anything like that, just find out what size the biggest size you want to print at, and make sure that it's at least 300 DPI. And you don't want to go too much, because depending on the speed of your computer, if the DPI, you know, if the resolution is too big, then you're going to run into some issues with the speed of your computer and everything. That's okay. I knew that. So Tally. So I keep forgetting I knew you had a nickname, because I always have problems pronouncing it. I knew it was Tally before, and then I forgot. But sorry about that. Let's see. Posters. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Did we miss any questions? I'm going to kind of go back here and see if there's anything I missed. Some people saying they're just now discovering me. That's awesome. Welcome aboard. And if you guys are curious what's kind of going on, this is my new product that's going to come out. It'll be available on Design Cuts, which is a marketplace, and I'll have more videos on that, and I'll show you a little more exactly what I'm doing here. But there's just a lot of ways to compose, like with the poster, all these different elements, like the bricks and the sound effects. It's all just things that you kind of use to populate your scene and you know, create artwork. So I'm going to go with while I'm waiting for some questions in the chat. Okay, not related to comics, but do I watch Star Trek? I do. I used to watch I haven't watched much of like the Next Generation of stuff. I kind of came into it later. A funny story, like I got my name because my parents did like the character Scotty from Star Trek, so that's where my name came from. But and when I was a kid, I had some of the Star Trek toys and the phasers and stuff like that. But it was a while before I actually started watching the original Star Trek. I was working at a film studio, and I used to watch Star Trek on my lunch break, and the original series. And I also I mean, I'm not as critical about it maybe as I am Star Wars. I'm probably a bigger Star Wars fan, but I still like all the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. I like most of the other ones are sort of hit and miss. I think they're saying every other one, every odd or every even. I think it was every even Star Trek movie is supposed to be a good one with the original series. I didn't really get as much into the Next Generation. The stuff that I did see, I did enjoy. But anyway, so a little off topic, but you know. How do I deal with very detailed backgrounds? That is a good question. So one thing that kind of leads into one of the most difficult things is perspective. And this new tool that I'm introducing, it's going to help you a lot with perspective. There's perspective grids, and there's actually buildings like this, what you're seeing, where you can take just a flat building and you can kind of skew it to match that perspective and build your scenes that way. Of course, not every scene is a background. I mean, is a city scene, but there's other, in this product, there's a bunch of other scenes. But if you guys work digitally and you use Clip Studio Paint, there are some really great perspective tools in there that you can use. It's just amazing what you can do with that. So that really has sped up and it takes a little while to get used to it. And I did do, in this series, Making Comics 101, there is a whole, pretty much anything I'm talking about, I'm just reading some of the chat. Much anything I'm talking about right now, I covered as an episode in Making Comics 101. So always go back and look. If you got any questions, there's probably an episode dedicated to that. But with very detailed backgrounds, like I said, and I'm of the opinion that not every background needs to be that detailed. Sometimes it can get confusing if your backgrounds are too detailed. And you can see what I'm doing here, where I'm taking this standard, this background scene, and I've put it into perspective. This is just this is a background that comes standard with this product, but I'm going in and I'm adding things to it. So I'm adding detail on top of that. So it's not going to just look the same. I'm crumbling the buildings, I'm breaking the windows. So I would always start off, I think, with backgrounds, depending on how much detail you want to put, it's just a matter of start with a little and then take it as far as you want, but don't go too big. Like I said, you definitely want to have that establishing shot. Let people know where you are, what your world is. And usually those establishing shots are where I spend most of the time on my background. And from there, it's just a little because what you're seeing on screen right now is a city scene. Once I've established that city, I can just throw a street sign up, and then because that's in the background of one of my characters, and you're going to know, oh, it's a city because there's a street sign or street light or something like that. So I don't really go, it's really to taste how detailed you want your backgrounds. Most people hate drawing backgrounds. I like them, but if I had to make every single background super detailed, again, I wouldn't get anything done. So as far as how detailed you go, it's kind of, I mean, this is art, and there really aren't any rules to art. So that's what I have to say about that. We have comments saying Picard is the best. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have a preference. There's that song, that's in the Weird Al song where they, that White Nerdy, where the only question I thought was hard was, do I like Kirk or do I like Picard? I guess I lean more towards Kirk, but that's just because I have more exposure to him. But yeah, I mean, and there obviously there are other captains of the Enterprise as well. So we're getting a little bit weeds in the Star Trek thing. Let's see. Okay, here. I don't know if this is a question, but here's a comment. For Clip Studio Paint or any other art program I tried, I don't get the perspective grids. I'm sure it's because I don't really understand. It really is hard to understand. I don't know, Remy, if you watched my episode. I tried to make it as simple as I could and showed how to use those grids. It took me a while, and I have quite a bit of experience with perspective. My first job was designing architectural renderings, and I still struggle with perspective. But those grids, once you can wrap your head around it, and it took me a little while, but once I did that, everything did start to kind of come together. And just start again with like anything else. Just start simple with boxes. Look at everything when you're making comics, when you're drawing anything with comics, and that's the hardest, whether it's a person, whether it's a prop, whether it's a building, everything is made up of basically 3 to 4 simple shapes, whether it's a square, which is a cube, circle, which is a sphere, and I'm talking, flat versus 3D, a rectangle, which can be like a cylinder. So everything is sort of based on those, and basically what you do is if you can imagine those 3D shapes, and then you can either shave parts of those away or add to them to build whatever you're building. And if you think, well, buildings are basically cubes, I mean, maybe they're not fully like a square cube, but they're rectangular. They're, once you understand that, you have the beginning. But then the good thing about Clip Studio Paint is because if you can get to the point where you can set up those grids, everything will snap to those grids, so you can't really draw it wrong. Anytime you lay down a line, it's going to snap to that perspective grid. And just, and if my video doesn't have enough information, that's the great thing about the internet, is there's like nothing that I would want to, that I want to learn, that I usually can't find out how to do it if I do enough digging. And most of that stuff is just available on YouTube. So it's just amazing. I mean, back when I started doing perspective, I mean, we had these giant, rolls of perspective grids that we roll out on this big table, and then we'd have to put a pin on either end where our vanishing points were, a big giant ruler that would kind of glide along those vanishing points and kind of move it diagonally to make all these. You don't have to do that anymore. So, and again, and with these, with this product, the Comic World, I'm not one of these people that are, that have any problems pitching their own stuff, but anything that I tell you that I have that costs money or anything, there's ways to do it for free. But anyway, so with this product, there's already pre-designed perspective grids that you can use if it's hard to kind of wrap your head around, like Clip Studio Paint, like how do I lay down those perspective grids? And kind of going back to detail, what you're seeing right now is, I'm taking those hard lines and I'm kind of chipping away at them, and that goes back to kind of more some of the questions as far as detail goes. So yeah, we're getting, let's see, I don't know how close we're getting. I got to find a better way to figure out how long I've been going. I'm just kind of gauging everything based on how far along on this drawing I am. So I'm going to see what other questions I have here that I can address. I know I had some questions here. Okay, so this is, let's see, Mokhtar Zain Art. Can you talk about finding a publishing house that do comics other than Marvel or DC and the big ones? Or how do I find them and work as a comic book artist for local publishing house for local, I think he's saying he used to do one for a local publishing house in Egypt. I want to try other places. So most of those companies are out there with a little digging. You can find, I think the hardest part isn't necessarily finding who publishes comics. It's getting them to publish your comic, depending on, if it's what they're looking for, if it's good enough or whatever. I'm kind of maybe not the right person to answer that question, because I've self-published pretty much everything that I put out. It's either self-published or it's for a client that they're doing a comic, So I haven't really approached. I know my friend Joshua Kimball just got picked up by Marcosia, I think, and also another friend of mine, Russ Leach, has comics published through Marcosia. I think they're in the UK. Yeah, there's a number of comic book companies out there, but you want to do your research. You want to know you want to find a company that is publishing the kind of work that you do. If you are doing a superhero book, probably somebody like Oni Press or something like that, or Fantagraphics isn't probably going to be interested unless you've got this really unique take on the superhero story. Different comic book companies publish different genres. I mean, Image, they publish a number of different, it seems like they publish a variety of different things, but you got to find out what's right for you. And there may be non-traditional routes you can go that aren't necessarily comic book publishers. But the one resource I would tell you to look at, and I haven't looked at these in a while, so I don't know if they're still, I know they're still out there, but I don't know, kind of what's in them. But there's a book called I think is it a writer and artist market? writer market, and there's also I think a children's writers and illustrators market, and these are books, and they may be online now too, but basically every year they publish a new book, and they'll tell you all these publishers that the publisher, they'll put in there what they're looking for. So, and you might even, I mean, things change, especially now with everything that's going on. A lot of these places may be going out of business, so it helps to have a current one, but you may be able to pick up a used one even cheaper. I don't know how much they cost, but it might be a good investment to pick up like a writer's market book, either online or like a Barnes & Noble or whatever. And like I said, it would make sense if they had digital, because that way you wouldn't have to retype everything when you're submitting, that you could just cut and paste the addresses and things like that. But they'll tell you, and there's comic book publishers in there as well, and they'll tell you what they're looking for, whether it's more young adult, obviously Scholastic, the stuff that they're going to publish is going to be more for young adult. And whereas, something else might be more adult, but you don't want to, you want to make sure you're sending the right type of story to the right people. Okay, so we got a question from Timothy here. How often do I go live? So I haven't gone live. Well, every week I go live a couple of times, and it's not always on my channel. So I do a show called The Artcasters. And that's more about the business of art and everything, and I do that with my friend Joshua Kimball. Sometime every other week it's on my channel. The opposite weeks it'll be on his channel. This week it'll be on his channel. I also do something called the 48-hour art check. That's never really on my channel. That is on my friend Corey Kerr's channel or my friend Joshua Kimball's channel. And that is just like sort of an art check where every Monday we go on there and we kind of hold each other accountable to what our goals are and everything like that. So I do those, but with this show, and it's kind of up to you. I mean, it seems like I got a decent amount of people watching. I got good questions, so I definitely want to do this again, but I don't. Right now, my schedule is basically put up one video a week, at least, I guess, not counting like Artcasters and stuff like that. So I would like to. I think I want to do this show every other week, but it depends on the popularity of it, how much people like it, how many if I get so many questions that I just can't get to them all, then what I'll probably do is I can maybe make it a weekly thing. It just depends. And maybe I can, because this is more centered around comics, maybe I could do something. It's all up to you. And I don't know. And also YouTube is kind of weird with how things perform. Sometimes live stuff doesn't perform as well. So I'll just kind of have to see. But I mean, and how it performs isn't really a make or break for me, because I do a lot of stuff that doesn't perform well just because I like to. So anyway, but we are getting close to sort of, I think we're getting close to wrapping up, but we got some other questions here. Hopefully I can get to this one quick. Question: how would you recommend improving consistency in your drawing? With that one, it's the 3 P's. It's practice, patience, and persistence. So, there's really no shortcuts. You got to practice. And in practicing, you want to do research. You want to find out, the people that are doing it right, what they're doing. And you want to just stick with it. And you got to have patience, because you're just not going to get, some people are going to be better than others. Some people are going to be quicker at becoming better artists than others. That's just the way it is. But everyone has to practice. Everyone has to put in the time to become a better artist. So it really is. It's simple, but it's the truth that you got to practice, and you got to have patience, because you got to know it's going to take a long time, and you got to stick with it, because most people will just give up. That this isn't, and you got to love it too. If you're in if anyone is in comics to make money, you're in the wrong business. You can. There are millionaires from comics. I'm not going to lie. Most people aren't that. That doesn't happen to most people. So you've got to love it, and like for me, my comics don't make a lot of money. I make money by other things, like the products and things that I put out. But it's still comics related, so I feel like I'm still doing comics. I'm still making money, and my comics make some. I'll run a Kickstarter if it's successful. I'll make some money from that, and partially I don't put out as many comics as I'd like to, so that's part of the reason why. But there are, there are a lot of people that can make good money, especially on crowdfunding, if you build that audience. But while you're working, while you're don't be afraid to put your stuff out there and build that audience. So by the time people can watch your journey, they can see you get better at it. And once you get better, you've already started building that fan base. So then once you get to the point where your stuff is good enough to publish a book, then you've already got a fan base. And it doesn't matter where you are. People are interested in that journey. They're interested in watching you grow, and they'll grow with you, because no matter where you are in your comic book journey, there's going to be somebody that's further behind you that you can impart some wisdom. I mean, there are people that are way more qualified to do this show right here than I am, but that's not going to stop me from letting people know, because I know there's a lot of people that can benefit from what I have, what I've learned along the way. Just like there's a lot of things that can benefit me from what other people are putting out there. So don't be afraid to share your work. And really, it's as simple as, patience, practice, and persistence as far as, becoming a better artist. Let's see. We got another question here. So JC Beichner, Writers Marketplace, Children's Publishers 2020 reference is available from Amazon and many other booksellers. Yeah, I knew they still publish it. I haven't seen one in a little while. I know JC's a writer, so she definitely knows that. But a lot of it's not going to be all comics. When you buy this book, it's not going to be all comics. I think we might be getting ready to wrap up pretty soon. So if we cut short, that's all right. There'll be a little outro. And any question, I'll go through here. Any questions that I didn't get to, I will address them on another episode. And please send me your questions either in the chat. If you're watching this after the fact, I'll try to get as many of these done get as many of these questions as I can. But just back to that writers market, there used to be also an illustrators market. I think it's still around, but it's not all comics. Obviously, you're going to pay whatever that book costs, and maybe 10% of it will be places that are interested in comics or interested in what you're publishing. But it still is a good resource. I used to do that one. Also they used to have the illustration one. I would send stuff out to greeting card companies and all kinds of different places to get my work published. And I got work for it. So it definitely paid off. So, but that's kind of where I would suggest looking at first. And again, a lot of this stuff is just online. Just if you do research, you'll discover, where to publish comics. Just that's a great thing about Google. You just type in, what you're looking for, and you're bound to find it. So hopefully you'll find a lot of the information here.
All right, so there you go. That is the first issue of Making Comics 101 Live. I'm hoping to do more of these, but it's up to you. It's up to you guys to give me those questions and keep this thing going. So be thinking of those questions. Let me know. You can let me know in the comments section if you want. You can send me an email at scott@circworks.com, or just be there live the next time I do this, and we'll try to get to those. And if you haven't checked out Making Comics 101, you definitely want to do that. There's a playlist on this station. And like I said, it is going to take you every step of the way through the process of making comics. So check that out. I'll see you later on the next one. And yeah, that is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at CircWorks on social media. And now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. If you like making comics, then go to CircWorks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.